Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I shall make a statement on yesterday's Supreme Court verdict and the way forward for this paralysed Parliament. 3 years ago, more people voted to leave the European Union than have ever voted for any party or proposition in our history. Politicians of all parties promised the public that they would honour the result. Sadly, many have since done all they could to abandon those promises and to overturn that democratic vote. And after 3 years of dither and delay that left this country at risk of being locked forever in the orbit of the EU, this government that I lead has been trying truly to get us out. And most people, indeed most supporters of the party opposite, regardless of how they voted 3 years ago, think the referendum must be respected. They want Brexit done. I want Brexit done, and people want us out on October the 31st with a new deal if possible, but without one if necessary. Now, 64 days ago, I was told that Brussels would never reopen the withdrawal agreement. We are now discussing a reopened withdrawal agreement in the negotiations. I was told that Brussels would never consider alternatives to the backstop, the trap that keeps the UK effectively in the EU but with no say. We're now discussing those alternatives in the negotiations. I was told Brussels would never consider arrangements that were not permanent. We're now discussing in the negotiations an arrangement that works on the principle of consent and is not permanent. I was told there was no chance of a new deal, but we are discussing a new deal. And this is in spite of the best efforts of the party opposite and this Parliament to wreck our negotiations by their attempts to take no deal off the table. The truth is that the majority in this Parliament, the majority opposite, are not opposed to the so-called no deal. This Parliament does not want Brexit to happen at all. And many of those who voted for the Surrender Act a few weeks ago said then that their intention was to stop a no-deal Brexit. They have said every day since that Parliament must vote against any deal at all. I think the people of this country can see very clearly what is going on. The people at home know that this...
Order! Order! People are gesticulating wildly. I can scarcely hear the Prime Minister myself, and I wish to hear the statement, as other colleagues should also do. The Prime Minister...
The people of this country can see perfectly clearly what is going on. They know that Parliament does not want to honour its promises to respect the referendum. The people at home know that this Parliament will keep delaying, it will keep sabotaging the negotiations because they don't want a deal. Mr. Speaker, the truth is that members opposite are living in a fantasy world. They really imagine that somehow they are going to cancel. This is what they want to do. They're going to cancel the first referendum. They're going to legislate for a second referendum, and Parliament will promise that this time, perhaps not the lady opposite, but Parliament will promise that this time it really, really will respect that vote. And they think that the public will therefore vote to remain, and everybody will forget the last few years. Mr. Speaker, I have to say I think that is an extraordinary delusion and a fantasy even greater than the communist fantasies peddled by the Leader of the Opposition. It will not happen. The public don't want another referendum. What they want and what they demand is that we honour the promise we made to the voters to respect the first referendum. And they also want us to move on, to put Brexit behind us and focus on the NHS, on violent crime, and on cutting the cost of living. And that is why I brought forward a Queen's speech. This government intends to present a programme for for life after Brexit. But some members of this House could not stand that either. Instead of facing the voters, the opposition turned tail and fled from an election. Instead of deciding to let the voters decide, they ran to the courts instead. And despite the fact that I followed the exact same process as my predecessors in calling a Queen's speech, the Supreme Court was asked to intervene in this process for the first time ever, and it is absolutely no disrespect to the judiciary to say I think the court was wrong to pronounce on what is essentially a political question at a time.
Order! Whatever the strength and intensity of feeling and the passions to which these matters give rise, we must hear what is being said in the chamber, and I wish to hear the Prime Minister.
The court was wrong to pronounce on what is essentially a political question at a time of great national controversy. So we have opposition MPs that block and delay everything, running to the courts to block and delay even more, including blocking legislation to improve and invest in our NHS and keeping violent criminals in jail. And I think the people outside this House understand what is happening. They know that nothing can disguise the truth. It's not just that this Parliament is gridlocked, paralysed, and refusing to deliver on the priorities of the people. It's not just unable to move forward. It's worse than that, Mr. Speaker. Out of sheer selfishness and political cowardice, members opposite are unwilling to move aside and give the people a say. They see MPs demanding that the people should be given a say one week and then running away from the election that would provide the people with a say. And worst of all, they see ever more elaborate legal and political manoeuvres from the party opposite, which is absolutely determined to say, we know best, and thumb their noses at the 17.4 million people who voted to leave the European Union. The leader of the opposition and his party do not trust the people. The leader of the opposition and his party are determined to throw out the referendum result, whatever the cost. They don't care, Mr. Speaker, about the bill for hundreds of millions of pounds that will come with every week of delay. They don't care if another year or more is wasted in arguing about a referendum that happened 3 years ago. All that matters to them now is an obsessive desire to overrule the referendum result. While we want to take our country up a gear, to go forward with a fantastic programme, an accelerated programme of investment in infrastructure, in health and education and technology, they are throwing on the handbrake. Well, Mr. Speaker, we will not betray the people who sent us here. We will not. That's what they want to do. We will not abandon the priorities that matter to the public. And we will continue to challenge those opposition parties to uphold democracy. If honourable and right honourable members opposite so disagreed with this government's commitment to leaving on October the 31st, they had a very simple remedy at their disposal, did they not? They could have voted for a general election. I have to confess, Mr. Speaker, that I was a little shocked to discover that the party whose members stood up in Brighton this week and repeatedly and in the most strident terms demanded an election, I heard them, is the very same party whose members already twice this month, not once but twice, refused to allow the people to decide on their next government. For 2 years they have demanded an election, but twice they have voted against it. The leader of the opposition changes his mind so often. I wonder whether he supports an election today or whether the shadow chancellor or the shadow attorney general have overruled him again, because they know that the voters will judge their manifesto for what it is: more pointless delay. Is he going to demand, perhaps he's going to demand an election and then vote against it? Just as he said he wants to negotiate a new Brexit deal and then vote against that too. Is he actually going to vote no confidence in this government? Is he going to dodge a vote of no confidence in me as Prime Minister in order to escape the verdict of the voters? I wonder, does he in his heart even want to be Prime Minister anymore? He says that I should go to Brussels on 17th of October and negotiate another pointless delay, but he doesn't want to go himself. And even if he did, his colleagues wouldn't let him, because quite frankly they recoil. They recoil at the idea of him negotiating on the people's behalf, representing this country with the likes of Vladimir Putin, let alone the EU or the mullahs of Tehran. Or is it perhaps that he wants a Conservative government? It would be a curious state of affairs indeed if Her Majesty's loyal opposition had every faith in the government of the day. So if in fact the party opposite does not have confidence in the government, they will have a chance to prove it. They have until the House rises. Let them listen. I think they should listen to this, Mr. Speaker. They have until the House rises today to table a motion of no confidence in the government. Come on then. And we can have that vote tomorrow. Or if any of the other parties, the smaller parties, fancy a go, they can table that motion and we'll give you the time for a vote. Will they have the courage to act, or will they refuse to take responsibility and do nothing but dither and delay? Why wouldn't they? What are they scared of, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, it is now well over. If that's what you're scared of, then have an election.
Order. I appeal to the House to have some regard to how our proceedings are viewed by people watching them in the country at large. Order! Let the remainder of the statement be heard. I'm grateful for the Prime Minister's exhortation, but I don't require it. I'm perfectly content. What I want to hear is the rest of the statement and then questioning on it. The Prime Minister.